So Andrey is a senior full stack at Bellwood. He impacted the lives of millions of Canadians by bringing credit card payments and Apple Wallet integrations to the Tim Hortons app. That sounds really cool. All right, so tonight he'll be talking about development containers. Please welcome Andrey to the stage.
All right. Hello. Oh, that was too loud. Hi, my name is Andrey, and for more than half of my career, I worked as a software development consultant. So if you think consultants are people who walk around and tell people what to do, those are management consultants. So for software development consultants, what it usually means is you work full-time for some company, and that company sells you services to some third company. And it happens that you would be working one project 2 months, another project 3 months. Sometimes you would be working 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 projects at the same time. And there would be different clients. They would be using different technical stacks. Some would be using NoSQL, some would be using SQL, different languages, and so on and so forth. So what my life used to look like when I was a consultant, something like this. So it would often mean that I would have to install, versions of Postgres like 12, 13, 15 on my computer, and then another client uses AWS version CLI 1, another one uses 2, and so on and so forth. And it's often that your development environment would be working on your machine, but not working on your colleague's machine, and vice versa. And then onboarding process is just like this bloated README that you have to go all at once and just hope that it works on your M1 chip or M3. So today I'm going to share with you how I kind of was able to tame this with the help of a very simple extension that just popped up in VS Code and be like, hey, want to try development containers? I'm like, yeah, sure. Yeah, why not? So to talk about development containers, we just gonna speedrun Docker really quick. For those who don't know Docker and need a refresher. What is Docker? Docker is a platform for running Docker containers. What are Docker containers? Docker containers are like a small virtual machines that run Docker images. Docker images, you might ask, is actually your packaged application, your compiled code, and environment that your application runs with. So it will be like a small operating system, any CLI dependencies that you need, your compiled code, your styles, everything. Right. So those are defined in a Docker file. And then why would we use Docker? So the thing about Docker is that it's very small and it's very reproducible. So usually when you would host your server, like some 10 years ago, you would rent a virtual machine somewhere, or you have your own or rent it in the cloud. And those are very expensive and hard to maintain. And Docker, you can ship it anywhere, run it anywhere, locally, Kubernetes, AWS, Azure, it doesn't matter. It's just like anywhere you run it, it's all the same. It's perfect. So usual development flow with the application that is going to be Dockerized is like you code an application on your local machine, you install your dependencies, you install your CLIs, you set up instance of Redis and Mongo and everything, right? And then you write the Docker file that describes your development environment and all the things, well, minus the development stuff, but all the things that you need to run it. Then you compile it into an image and you throw it into a repo, the image registry repo, and then you can deploy it from there. Or what if you've been working in the Docker the whole time? Like you don't need to go backwards. You like development container is essentially just that. It's a Docker container which you go in and do your stuff there. You do your development in that container. So how that exactly works is you have your local machine, which runs your instance of a VS Code, right? And then there's a Docker container, which runs a server that VS Code from your machine can connect to. That container has its own file system. It can run terminal processes. Your debugger running application has its own set of extensions. And then your source code is mounted onto the container. And then whenever you make your changes, those changes basically reflected back, which means if your container restarts or you delete it, your code is still there, like all your changes still there. And now we go into the demo. So I'm just going to show you how real easy it is to use Docker containers. So to actually use them, we need a Docker desktop, and we will need an extension called dev containers in VS Code. So here's my VS Code, and I have my extension. Something like that, which means I can open my control panel and just select this option, which is add dev configuration container. And I choose to add configuration to my workspace, so it would be shareable with my colleagues. It's going to go into my source control, and I'll be able to share it with anyone. So here we can actually choose an image that we want to run. So for example, I want to develop an backend application with like Nest.js, right? So I would need Node, and I will need a database like Postgres. So I'll select this conveniently named image. Then we select an environment like operating system it's going to be run on. So these are versions of Debian. So we're just going to choose the default one. And we can select a lot of features from here. There's like a ton, probably a few hundred. So what we actually need is a Nest CLI. There we go. And say we want AWS CLI as well. All right, and then I hit OK. Yep, sure, we don't need dependable. Who needs that? And then it creates a .dev container folder with a couple of things, and it prompts me to reopen this folder in the container. So it's just going to build this container for me and connect right to it. You see, opening remote right here. So, and we can test. So you can also see that my directory changed its workspaces, dev containers, which is different from my home environment. So because we are in the container right now. And then we can check if we have a Nest CLI. There it is. And then let's just go through what we have here. So we have a dev container definition, which essentially has a name, has any compose files that it might include, and any features that you might need. So it also comes with Docker file, which is not big right now. It just specifies the image that we're pulling, as well as Docker compose, which is a way to orchestrate several images into one container. So for this, you can see that we have our Postgres right here. And if I needed to add a Redis instance to my container for further development, I would just edit this file and drop it in there, commit it to source repository, and then all my colleagues have their local Redis. They don't need to do anything. And how it looks right here is I opened my dev container, and you can see I have dev container running, and I have an application and the database. And oh yeah, now the cool feature is if there's any extensions that you think you might need to have in your dev container, you can just right-click on this thing and add to dev container JSON, boom. And next time you pull this code or your colleague pulls this code and spins the container, they have all the extensions that you pulled in there, right? Very convenient for sharing with people. So that's a quick demo. There are a couple caveats, of course, with development containers. One is that community-driven and things break. A lot of features might not exactly work with all the images that you can pull. I did have to selectively select a couple of things to show you today. And another thing, it is resource intensive. So I'm running this on the MacBook M3. I also tried to run it on M1, but I did have a lot of lag with my VS Code when I was running it on Windows. So there's that. But there's a cool thing that if you don't know, the GitHub codespaces, which is essentially a VS Code in browser. Where's my browser? Right there. Sure. So if you go to your repository on GitHub, you can start your code space. And then if you have any dev container definition in there, it will just build that container with everything that you have in that definition for you, and you have it in the cloud, and you can work it in the browser from anywhere. And if you don't, you can just add the definition right there. And another thing is you don't need to work in codespaces in your browser. You can connect your local VS Code to a remote container that runs in codespaces. That's all. Anybody has any questions? Yes. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'm trying to get a handle on the scope of what you're doing. Do I see it right that you want to use your VS Code app, and to switch between clients, you will switch your dev container and you just keep on typing in your VS Code?
Pretty much. You can have, well, you would essentially, ideally, you would spin down one of the development containers that you're not working on, because they do eat a lot of resources, especially if you run an application. So I had a container where I was running a server, a client, and a real-time server, and that was eating a lot of resources, and my local machine started lagging as well. So yes, you can connect to containers running on your machine, containers running anywhere else if they, expose ports for that.
But you can control these containers from your VS Code app.
Yes. So in that extension, you have interface to control these containers, and you have pretty much a bunch of attributes that you can change. And there are two containers. I have a backup container that I can just switch to, and it would just open the folder with that container. And well, it will open the folder, spin up the container, and connect my VS Code instance.
Yep,
I have a question. How well does this work for like an app that is already Dockerized?
Pretty well. Again, depends on how powerful your machine is and how powerful your app is. You can basically use the Docker's file that you already have and use that as your definitions for dev container. It might be a little bit tricky, and not like all the stuff would work right off the box. You might need to do some additional configuration for that. But yeah, after that, it definitely should work. It's just a container.
Then the second question is like, how much flexibility do you have in terms of like environment? So if, for example, I want to have like a different, maybe SSH config for maybe pushing to, so this is like different projects, right? I want to maybe have different accounts. Like, is it possible to use this dev environment to set up like different SSH stuff?
Yeah, so there are a lot of things that you can do to configure. So the thing is, for example, you can make a Docker, like your dev container, as simple as just like Alpine Linux, and there's nothing in it, and you just like add stuff onto it. Unfortunate thing about it, if you do delete your container, all that is gone unless it's in your definition, right? But there's also scripts that will be running that you can set up to run with your container spinning up. If you want to set up those environments, but they're going to end up in your repo unless you pull them from somewhere ad hoc when you spin up containers. So I haven't tried it, but I guess in theory. Sorry, there's one in the back.
Maybe I missed something.
Yes.
If you set up a container in GitHub,
Okay.
instead of your local computer, can I grant access to somebody else to ask to run my application for that or the purpose, or it's only I have access to? Can I give access to somebody and somebody else running?
So, whoa, I apologize. Yes. In short form, yes. In long form, you would need to. It does forward a port that you can access. Like, for example, if you're running application locally, right, it just runs on your local host 3000, right? But you would have to basically expose a port on the container. It gives you a URL, which you can go and basically see your front-end application, right, when you're developing in codespaces in GitHub.
So I can use it as a kind of sandbox environment or
Yeah, that's exactly what codespaces are.
Beta tester alpha, beta testers, or
Sure. Sorry, you've been waiting for a while.
There's more here, sorry.
Wait.
I hear when people do Docker, they also do Docker Compose.
Yes.
What does that fit in?
So It depends on the pre-configured thing that you select from that dropdown. So for example, one I did select includes Docker Compose and spins an additional database for me. Like it used the Docker file that it pulls from somebody else's repo who just open sourced it, right? And then it adds this to Docker Compose. And then if you want to add anything else to your Docker Compose, just add it in there. Sorry. Yep, that's it. Sorry. You can ask me a question later. You too. All right.
Thank you, everyone.